It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Tears and hugs on the tarmac. The families now back on British soil, their government accused of being slow to act. The fragile ceasefire holds for now, but thousands remain trapped. The journey to safety still perilous.
Any minute I feel as if I will die. Well, it was very difficult.
Also tonight, the Prince, his phone records and his email proof that the Queen backed taking legal action over phone hacking. The migrants accused of being asylum shoppers as MPs back the controversial small boats bill. Mercury's rising and Spain sweltering with record temperatures predicted and a growing risk of wildfires. And Manchester City close in on the Premier League title after an emphatic victory against leaders Arsenal. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30. Hello there, good evening. They are the lucky ones, the first British nationals flown out of war-torn Sudan, landing on UK soil today, but many thousands more have been left behind. Those fleeing were forced to make the dangerous journey to an airport just outside the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, some travelling for hours through military checkpoints and past armed fighters to board a military plane. We'll have the latest on the rescue operation, which is now ramping up in a moment. But we begin tonight with the tearful reunions on the tarmac. Sky's Ashna Hurinag has our first report.
Finally, back on UK soil. And this says it all.
It's so unsafe. It's so unsafe. I'm so glad they're home.
Yasmin is reunited with her mother and grandmother after no news for days. Sharma and her mother have been awake for 24 hours. They left Sudan in the middle of the night for Cyprus, and now they're home into the arms of loved ones.
It was very bad feeling because any minute I feel as if I will die. Well, it was very difficult.
Martasim is waiting for his sister, who went as a holiday maker, but is now returning as an evacuee.
She gone for holiday and she's stuck there because the war started there. And just for her, they bring her safe today. I'm happy for that, very happy.
They are the first British nationals to be flown out of Sudan by the UK government. They stepped off this chartered aircraft, one of at least 4 being laid on. After criticism, the government has been too slow to act. But evacuating 4,000 UK nationals isn't simple. These families behind me are just some of the over 100 people that were on that first flight that landed here at Stansted Airport. Speaking to them, many of them are in shock. They are dealing with a lot of grief, and whilst many of them say they're happy to be here, they're heartbroken for the people they've left behind. Hafiz hasn't slept in 3 days. He's thinking of his wife and 4 children currently bound for Cyprus. This is his 9-year-old on the RAF aircraft. He says he had to fight with the Foreign Office to get them on it.
Communications are very bad. We don't know where to go, who to talk to. A war is going on, people are getting killed, and you are listening to people who are not giving you any kind of hope, shutting you down, telling you you might not get through. When you're looking for hope, they tell you you might not make it.
Hafiz is hanging on to hope. A temporary and short ceasefire has provided this window of opportunity. But time and patience for Britons stuck in Sudan is running out, and there are still so many who don't know when they'll be home. Ashna Hurinag, Sky News at Stansted Airport.
Well, the fragile ceasefire agreed by the 2 warring military factions behind the violence is just about holding tonight, but humanitarian conditions are deteriorating, with only 16% of health facilities now functioning. British troops are on the ground protecting the airport, which for now offers one of the few routes to safety. Well, those who find a way of travelling to the airfield north of the Sudanese capital face a long wait to board on a flight to Larnaca Airport in Cyprus, from where Alistair Bunkle reports.
Many people are arriving in Cyprus utterly traumatised and too upset to talk about what they've been through to get here. Dr. Abdurrahman, his 4 sons and his wife landed on this plane late in the afternoon. They had to leave her parents behind.
Everything started to erupt. A lot of houses has been bombarded. We lost friends, colleagues, and the streets were really unsafe, scary. So,
was it frightening?
Yeah.
What was it like?
It was kind of tiring because you had to go upstairs, downstairs, because downstairs is more safer because they normally hit upwards and it might hit our... Yeah.
And you're glad to be safe now?
Yes.
This is what they've escaped from. The 72-hour ceasefire is barely holding, but it has given people a chance to get out of hiding and stock up on food. What little there still is. Very few hospitals are still running. Those that are chaos. If there is space, the RAF flights are bringing out other nationalities too. El Tayeb is Australian. He came in on a British flight.
Look into the road and you see someone holding an AK looking at you and you just walk right back home. That's all you could do. You can't say nothing, you can't do anything. Stay home, be sheltered. So if they come knocking at your door, you know, and that's what's going to happen soon, you know, because there's a famine going on right now. It's just shortages of food, water, supplies. Nothing's open, nothing's bringing supplies in. People are running out, and sooner or later they're going to start jumping over doors, extorting houses.
Within hours of arriving in Cyprus, the evacuees are put on charter flights back to the UK. At least 2 left today. This is the 4th British military flight to have arrived in Cyprus. Downing Street say that by the end of the day, 8 will have come here. They have a very small window with a lull in the fighting in which to try and get as many people out as possible. That window is closing fast. UK troops are now taking over responsibility of the airfield north of Khartoum from German forces. The RAF flights will continue for as long as they are able to. Hundreds, possibly thousands, are still trapped. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Cyprus.
To our other top story now, lawyers for Prince Harry today outlined more than 200 articles about him published in The Sun and the now defunct News of the World, which they claim were printed as a direct result of private information being unlawfully gathered. A tranche of emails from Harry himself and from senior palace staff were also released, including one suggesting the Queen backed the idea of taking a stronger stance on phone hacking. Here's our royal correspondent, Laura Bondoc.
We've heard his arguments. Now we've seen his evidence. Prince Harry publicly releasing private emails from those at the heart of the late Queen's household. It was 2018 and Harry wanted an apology over phone hacking from The Sun and News of the World. His emails show it's being pursued by Buckingham Palace. On February the 1st, he emails Sally Osman, the late Queen's Director of Communications, asking for an update. When she replies there's been no response, he says the institution's looking ineffective and weak, ending there needs to be an ultimatum. Otherwise, this institution and everything it stands for becomes a laughingstock. A month later, Sally Osman emails she has the Queen's consent to use legal action. Her Majesty's approved the wording, which essentially says there's increasing frustration at their lack of response and engagement. And while we've tried to settle without involving lawyers, we will need to reconsider our stance unless we receive a viable proposal. But nothing happens. Harry claims a year later his father takes a different stance to the Queen, demanding he drop his legal action to prioritise positive stories about him and Camilla. Phone hacking campaigners say it shows the royal family scared of the tabloids.
It's a blackmail plot, essentially. It says, listen, we're going to tell your secrets. You either put up and shut up and do as you're told, or we're going to publish what we like about you.
Harry's evidence also includes his mobile phone records, which he claims shows the repeated hacking of his voicemail. With just over a week until the coronation, this comes at a bad time for the King and Queen consort. They were lighting up Liverpool for Eurovision. But the spotlight stays on Harry and allegations about his father's motives and moves to stop his fight with the tabloids. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Asylum seekers arriving in the UK in small boats are tonight one step closer to being deported after MPs backed a controversial bill. That's after a brewing rebellion over detaining children was diffused. And despite a high-profile intervention from the former Prime Minister and Home Secretary Theresa May, who argued the legislation would give traffickers another weapon to hold people in slavery. Here's our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue.
We've doubled the funding for the National Crime Agency.
She's a Home Secretary who pledged to stop the boats, determined to succeed where her predecessors failed.
On a whole range of measures, we've been working on a plan that is going to fix this unacceptable problem. That being 45,000 people arriving here illegally last year, over £6 million being spent a day on hotel accommodation. That is an unacceptable situation.
Can I just get clarity on what you mean when you say you want to stop the boats? Because my understanding is that doesn't mean getting the number down to zero anytime in the short or medium term.
I think it will be very obvious to reasonable observers as to whether we've succeeded in our pledge to stop the boats.
You say it's clear and simple. Will you set a target for where you want the numbers to be this time next year?
I think it will be very obvious to the British people and the public as to whether we've succeeded.
The British public won't accept us every year having to come up with another piece of legislation.
But behind closed doors, the politics.
Hang on a second, let's have a bit of common sense here and do what we need to do to safeguard the British public.
The common sense group of right-wing Conservatives meet regularly to talk small boats.
When the people voted to take back control, they meant their borders, they meant their sovereignty.
They've pushed for limits on the role of European judges, concessions granted by the government today.
From Worthing to Walthamstow, the British people want to stop the boats.
But as the illegal migration bill reaches its final stages in the Commons, not all Conservatives are happy.
I would say rather it's a slap in the face of those of us who actually care about the victims of modern slavery.
Isn't, in fact, my right honourable friend, in effect asking this House to give legislative sanction to at least the possibility that a Minister of the Crown will deliberately disobey the international law obligations of this country?
One of the reasons that Conservative MPs feel so passionately is because the issue of small boats is something that comes up again and again on the doorstep, particularly in places like this with hotels housing asylum seekers. They become a flashpoint in the argument about immigration.
This is Datchet in Windsor, one of the many places where hotels have been boarded up to house migrants like Umar.
Since COVID-19 came, I'm in the hotel.
So it's been months you've been in there?
Yeah, I come here 2015.
And you don't have to look far to find a view.
Locally, of course, it's to cause intentions. The same people that used to let their children out at night, they don't let them out anymore. And you have to give them, they're honest, you know, because you don't know who's in there.
The small boats bill may be sailing through Parliament, but it's people in places like this the government need to win over. Ali Fortescue, Sky News.
To Spain now, where near record temperatures for spring and a lengthy drought are increasing the risk of wildfires. The areas on the map marked in dark pink, like in Cordoba, are expected to reach 15 degrees above normal from tomorrow, with highs of around 40 degrees Celsius. Our climate change and energy correspondent Hannah Thomas-Peter reports now from Seville in southern Spain.
As the temperature rises in southern Spain, Seville's annual festival is in full swing. Around 500,000 people have converged on this baking city in a celebration of a region that is well used to the heat. But it is far too early in the year for these kind of conditions.
The temperature in Seville is so hot, and water, we flush water all the day.
Can you even be outside in this kind of heat in the middle of the day?
Not at all. I mean, you cannot. You have to be at home and then go outside at 8, 9 in the evening.
Do you worry about Seville getting hotter?
I mean, I do, because I'm very worried about the climate change. things are getting even worse.
Away from the festival, tourists try to stay cool.
It was exhausting yesterday, wasn't it, on the golf course?
This group of friends found it too much.
Would you come back to a city like Seville or to Andalusia even in the height of summer, knowing that these temperatures are possible?
No, I think in a word, I think you've got to pick your time, haven't you? Because it's hard to, you want to walk about and enjoy everything in a city, don't you? And it's hard to do that in the summertime.
Just south of the city lies the Dinana Wetlands National Park. The horses are grazing where there should be water. It is a sign that all is not well.
This heatwave comes after a hot, dry winter, not just in Spain, but across Europe. In fact, last summer was Europe's hottest ever. And it's this dry, parched ground and lack of rainfall that's starting to create real problems in this country, with reservoir levels falling and farmers worried they can't water their crops.
Drought driven by climate change, says the Spanish president, has become a major national concern. Field guide Jose Gallan has watched the land change around him and agrees.
They worry more than for animal or plant, of course. I worry more about the society, more about our way of life. So we need to think about this. And it's a global situation, but in this area more close to Africa, maybe that impact will be higher than in other places.
This particular heat wave should start to ease by the weekend, but there is little real relief in sight. For southern Spain, a long, hot summer awaits. Hannah Thomas-Peter, Sky News in Seville.
Now it's a phone call between two leaders, the first for the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Chinese President Xi Jinping since the Russian invasion. It's been described as long and meaningful, but can it change the course of the conflict? Well, let's go live to our correspondent Helen Ann Smith, who's in Beijing. China has certainly been seen by some as the one country which could broker peace. So how significant then was today's conversation?
I think it's highly significant. Whether it actually manages to broker a peace is a completely different matter. We know both sides have actually wanted this call to happen for some time, and there were some really interesting details in the readouts. Zelensky, for his part, described the call as long and meaningful. He's actually going to send an ambassador here to Beijing, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in China released its statement. President Xi apparently told Zelensky that negotiation is the only way out of the war, and said, I quote, that China would never pour fuel on the fire, an apparent swipe at Western countries who have provided military aid to Ukraine. Look, remember, China wants to present itself as a peace broker in this conflict. It says it's one of the only countries that has the power to do that it's one of the only countries that hasn't taken sides. And although it hasn't overtly condemned or condoned the war, many say that while today was the first time Xi has spoken to Zelensky, he's spoken to President Putin multiple times since the invasion broke out. He actually undertook a 3-day state visit to Moscow in March that was very friendly, and China has provided Russia with finance and important diplomatic cover as well. So lots of criticism, certainly from the West, about whether China could play that role. Whether it makes any difference, well, it is possible that China could maybe bring parties to the table, maybe broker a ceasefire, but in terms of actual long-term peace, remember, China has a lot of reasons to not want to see a weakened and defeated, humiliated Russia. They are important allies economically, strategically, ideologically. So I think any terms that would be appropriate and acceptable to Putin right now and to China is probably unlikely to be acceptable to the Ukrainians.
Helen Ann Smith, live there in Beijing. Thank you. Rape trials without juries will soon take place in Scotland as part of sweeping reforms to the justice system. The pilot project, which will only apply to certain cases, will test whether having a single judge is more effective than a jury. But today, a leading lawyer told Sky News that the change could lead to more miscarriages of justice, as our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis reports.
I was raped and abused by someone who I really trusted. I actually attempted to take my own life because of it.
Ellie is a survivor, attacked by her boyfriend, abused at university when she was 20.
The jury did get to hear my rapist confess on tape, and obviously I did manage to secure a guilty verdict. But I think it's interesting to note that That verdict wasn't actually unanimous, and so the amount of evidence that it takes to secure a conviction is enormous, and even then not everyone on that jury is going to believe you.
Under major new plans, juries would be replaced with a single judge as part of a pilot in High Court rape cases. For all other trials, jury sizes would reduce, 15 people cut to 12, and 8 of them would be required to return a guilty verdict to convict. And Scotland's unique not proven verdict would be scrapped. It essentially means the same as not guilty, but is seen as confusing and creates a stigma for not completely clearing the accused.
Juries bring their attitudes and prejudices and false assumptions to bear when making decisions in rape cases. That is contributing to guilty men walking free.
These are the biggest proposed changes to Scotland's legal system in generations. The not proven verdict delivered by juries in courtrooms like this one date back hundreds of years. Humza Yousaf's administration here in Scotland want to improve dreadful conviction rates. Only around half of rape cases end up in a guilty verdict. Compare that to, on average, 90% in other cases. But it is feared that these changes could lead to more innocent people being sent to prison.
The idea that state-appointed judges are going to replace civilians in trying other civilians, it's a frightening concept. I mean, it's the first thing that an authoritarian government does.
An argument denied by ministers.
I won't be appealing to the lowest common denominator in this debate because we owe victims of crime so much better.
Those changes are likely years away. Controversy over the courts is only just beginning. Conor Gillis, Sky News, Edinburgh.
7 men and 3 women have been arrested on suspicion of murder after a man died in Brentford in West London in the early hours of this morning. Officers were called to the scene to reports of intruders, but despite the efforts of emergency services, the man was pronounced dead. A man who assisted the killer of Olivia Pratt-Corbell has been jailed for 22 months. Paul Russell drove Thomas Cashman back to his van after the shooting and disposed of his clothing. He claimed he didn't know the 9-year-old girl had been killed when he helped Cashman on the night of the murder. UK regulators have blocked Microsoft's $69 billion attempt to buy the developer of Call of Duty. Activision, the technology giant which owns the Xbox games console, had offered a 10-year guarantee that new versions of the franchise would be available on rival PlayStation consoles. But the Competition and Markets Authority expressed concern that the acquisition could hinder competition. Well, let's turn now to the tale of 3 women, all with very different experiences of the coronavirus pandemic. Imogen is clinically vulnerable, Nicola is being treated on a COVID ward, and Tanisha, a former tennis pro, has been forced into retirement. Today, on the eve of the closure of the NHS app used to track the virus, and as the WHO confirms the outbreak's emergency phase is over, they've been speaking to our health correspondent, Ashish Joshi.
Would you mind just doing a quick test, please, before you come in?
Testing for COVID.
Thank you.
Wearing masks. A daily pandemic routine for all of us. But for around 500,000 immunocompromised people in the UK, like Imogen, it still is.
Hi, all clear?
Yeah, all good. Any infection for her, even now, is potentially life-threatening. She's worried about another fixture of the last 3 years disappearing, the official NHS COVID app.
For people like me, the fact that we still need to think about being so careful and our lives are still so much on hold, absolutely we'd like things to be different. But COVID hasn't gone away, and stopping recording it and trying to ignore it isn't actually a public health strategy.
The app is estimated to have stopped millions of infections. This is a different phase of the fight. Nicola is one of the only patients on this COVID ward with the virus as a main cause of illness. She has diabetes, which makes her particularly vulnerable.
3 years ago, I was frightened. This thing was a monster, and I don't think people are as frightened of it now.
It's not as it was a couple of years ago.
Vulnerable groups are being offered booster vaccines this spring, but the NHS has largely shifted away from firefighting to planning for a virus that's here to stay.
when we see outbreaks or perhaps new variants of COVID come along, I think we do still have to be particularly vigilant at those times, because it will have an impact, as we discussed, on staffing and how we are able to look after people in hospital.
So this is the pass that I used at junior Wimbledon doubles.
Tanisha only ever wanted to be a professional tennis player. This was her a month before she got ill. Now she is among 2 million people in the UK suffering from long COVID. And at just 21, she's been forced to retire.
I'm grieving my life, I'm grieving myself, because that loss of independence is so unsettling. It makes me almost want to cry, because I don't know if I'll ever be able to live a life where COVID and long COVID isn't at the back of my mind.
COVID is not as dangerous as it once was, but as the last of the pandemic protocols are removed, its potential impact shouldn't be underestimated or forgotten. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.